Hi everyone, it's Monday again, which means it's another opportunity to look at how we make money through property. Today's episode is going to be focused on what we have been calling the Monty project, which is really 4 properties located at number 2 Montgomery Street, which is a bit of a mouthful, in Kilburn in Ayrshire. And it's a very relevant topic because we've actually just completed on the refinance on this one. It just went through at the tail end of last week. So I thought it would be cool just to go through a very live deal that we've actually went through the motions on, and more so one that we actually still own in the Rood Group portfolio, just to give you an understanding of the kind of things that we're buying for ourselves and opportunities that we plan on holding long term. So same structure as the past couple of weeks in the previous episodes on this series. I'll just give you an overview and a bit of a background as to how this deal came about, the various factors we had to consider before deciding whether to purchase or not, and ultimately we'll look at a couple of ways as to how we can make money through an opportunity like this. So to give you an overview of this property, it was a unique opportunity that I actually presented to Alex and Laurie directly. It was an off-market opportunity, but it involved this full building, which within the building has 2 one-bedroom flats and 2 two-bedroom flats. Now, 2 of the main factors that we had to consider straight away was, one, that 2 of the properties within this building were actually occupied, and 2, the property was in a horrific state. Really, there shouldn't have been anybody in these properties. Not one bit of it was compliant, and genuinely, not one bit of it was compliant. It really wasn't a dreadful state of affair. And there was a lot of things to consider when assessing this one, more than just what's it worth, what's it going to cost, and what's it worth at the end, because we had the complications regarding those that were coming. So I'll give you a bit more in-depth detail on that as we progress through today's episode. But as you can see through this video, we had our media team, Visual Productions, create for us. You can really see the required. One thing that we always personally distinguish between is a refurb and a renovation. A refurb is very much just a cosmetic upgrade, perhaps new kitchen, new bathroom, new carpets, decor, that kind of thing. A renovation is very much back to brick upgrades, electrics, heating, damp treatment, all of these things. And genuinely, there wasn't one element of construction that this building didn't need. So yeah, it was a very challenging project, but as you'll see when we look at the numbers, it's been a very rewarding project. So I'll just go into detail now. As to the background of how this one came about. And ultimately, it started with a direct marketing campaign that I was running with a company that I was working with at the time. And it came from one lead for something completely unrelated, which through a bit of proactive legwork I managed to piece together another opportunity, which in turn eventually led to this Montgomery Street deal. So it was a previous client because we had sold a number of properties for them in a block that was actually just round the corner from this one. They were property investors that had accumulated these over a number of years. They were also a letting agent, but their focuses had changed in a different industry altogether. So they'd kind of become a bit negligent towards these properties, there were 2 tenants living in them. There was 2 people who were living in this building, and like I said, not one bit of this was compliant, or just genuinely just not somewhere you would actually even want to live. But it was something that we had to factor in. And obviously the extent of the work that was required was going to be massive. This couldn't have been done by a standard, buy-to-let investor or, a very amateur property investor. This was going to require significant renovation, and therefore it was going to need someone with serious capital to be confident enough that they could manage this scope of works as well. So Alex and Laurie were certainly the first people that I thought of that would be able to accommodate this. And actually at the time when we bought this one as part of the Root Group portfolio, the building code didn't even exist. So although they assessed this, that they were capable of bringing on such an extensive project at that time, it was very much still an external company that was looking to complete it for them. Eventually the building code launched, and it turned out it was a building code that turned this one around. Which is massive when you can see the standard of finish as we progress through this episode. The standard of finish that the guys actually got out of what could have been a building that was ready to be knocked down, given the amount of damp and rot that was going on in here. But yeah, this was very much a direct to vendor opportunity that I had created and presented to Alex and Laurie for them to purchase and add to their portfolio. So we'll take a look at it in more detail now. So the numbers, as I said at the beginning, this was 4 properties, and we had to assess the whole building. Purchasing the building in its entirety gave a lot of control. This really wouldn't have been able to go forward without owning all 4 properties, just given the extent of the repair that was required. Because 2 of them were occupied, one of the tenants was absolutely brilliant, a really good guy, had his issues and things, but he was paying rent on time. He'd not long moved in. Obviously he was concerned about the state of the property and what was going to happen. So we basically had to renovate one of the ground floor properties. He was in the upper 1-bedroom flat. We had to then move him into the ground floor 2-bedroom apartment, so that we could refurbish the one that he was living in, and then kindly ask him to move back into his smaller flat. And he was certainly more than accommodating. But by the end of the refurbishment project, we ended up getting a new tenant. He was moved out, and yeah, all of these properties are now occupied, but neither of the 2 original tenants were there. The second tenant was nowhere near as nice and as accommodating as the first. It was actually a really difficult process on this, but basically the tenant never even lived there. I think it was just used as an address to collect benefits or whatever it was, but supposedly the tenant was in and out of prison, just had some drink and drug related issues, and yeah, eventually we served notice on him. It was on the old tenancy agreements. Short tenancy agreement, it wasn't a PRT, so served notice. She had a major issue with it, and basically when we went back after she'd been evicted to start work on the property, they had thrown dirty needles all over the flat, and it just wasn't an environment we could have our guys go into. So we had to get environmental health involved, and it all just became a much more dangerous and just difficult process, more so than what it needed to be. So yeah, this one certainly came with its challenges, but once that was resolved, we fully renovated all of the properties. New kitchens, new bathrooms, new electrics, heating systems, right back to brick to treat all the damp and the rot. Everything from top to bottom was redone, including all the external work, such as fully repainting, upgraded windows. There was really no box unticked when it came to renovation on this building, so you'll see that by the spend that we actually done on this, which originally we had budgeted for about 50 grand, and once we got in, we seen just how bad it had been. So let's take a look at the numbers so we can better understand how we still made money from this. So I had a surveyor go out to this before I presented it to Alex and Laurie. Where given its current condition, the whole building, 2 1-beds and 2 2-beds, had a combined value of 65 grand. And I wanted to highlight this value for the point of that everybody always talks about below market value when it comes to investment. And a lot of people will say, typically the cash funds that you speak to, or these cash rich investors, are saying, I want 30 to 40% discount below market value, or some of the more amateur guys are saying, minimum 20 to 25% is what I want, and they'll just dismiss every deal if it doesn't have that margin. But this is clear that depending on the opportunity at hand, there is areas where you can increase value still by paying what it's worth in its current condition, and this was really very relevant here. And I had to kind of position that with Alex and Laurie, who fully seen the opportunity that was available here. But yeah, the collective value by a Rick's Chartered Surveyor on all 4 flats here was £65,000. Now, the negotiations on this was very difficult because the existing owner had actually spent more than that on these, but just throughout the years with neglect and various other factors, obviously the condition of the properties had massively diminished, and it wasn't necessarily all their fault, but the back and forth negotiation on this was very difficult for me, but I finally managed to get an agreed price at £60,000 to acquire all 4 properties. The legal fees, just a collective, albeit this was a portfolio of 4, all being sold by the one vendor, given that the ADS position, this ended up going through as 4 separate individual transactions. So the £60,000 was basically spread across all 4 flats, and the legal fees were about £3,000. Obviously, because of the way we've done that, there was no ADS that would apply, because it was below the £40,000 threshold for each property. Therefore, in Scotland, no 4% additional dwelling supplement was applied, and it was just a straightforward pay your conveyancing costs and searches and outlays. The sourcing fee on this one that I charged Alex and Laurie was £5,000 plus VAT, which if you look at that combined purchase, at a current market value of £65,000, straight away just by the purchase price, the legal fees and the sourcing fees, we're already coming in at £69,000, so we're paying over market value just to buy the properties at this level. So you really need to understand what you're doing and understand the demographic of the area and the comparable sales value to establish whether this was a viable investment or not. And certainly, there was plenty of evidence to suggest that there was, but there was a lot to do in order to get there. So because of all the complications and the extensive works that this property required, we ended up spending about £80,000 on the renovation of this building. So you're looking at it, it was about 20 grand a flat, which when you're talking about a 1-bedroom property, it's crazy to think that you've spent £20,000 on it. But you've seen from the before videos and the pictures, this was in serious disrepair, and we could have easily spent much more than 80 grand on it if we weren't been able to absorb a lot of the cost through the building code. You can see that the total acquisition costs, including the renovations and all the fees, was a total spend of £149,000. So just about 150k to have these kind of walk-in condition 4 properties. The end value after refurbishment came to a total of £200,000. So like I said, this is a very live deal because we've just completed the refinance on this. So when we sent the surveyors out for the purpose of refinance, they valued the 2-bedroom flats at £55,000 each and the 1-bedroom flats at £45,000 each, which was actually an increased value from what we expected. However, we did spend £30,000 more on the renovation costs, so it kind of evened itself out across the board. So let's take a look at how we actually make money from an opportunity like this. And obviously, given the fact that Rood Group purchased these properties directly, there's only one strategy that we were going to implement, and that was buy to let. And the reason I selected this one is because it's live. We just carried out the refinance on this, so the figures here are as accurate as possible. But yeah, it's just great to establish how this looks like for us in terms of an investment, and ultimately for you guys to assess what you would do if you would look to keep these ones, or if you would look to offload and take the lump sum. But certainly for us, we've basically got 4 brand new properties that are really, we've got tenants in them straight away, big demand in the Kilburn area for rental stock. So ultimately we're going to keep these long term. And if we look at the numbers, you can see quite clearly how this was a really good deal to bother taking all of that headache on for. So when we look at it, total cost was 149 grand. The end value, so when the surveyors went out for the purpose of refinance, they came back and revalued them at 200 grand for the whole building. Because of the scale that we're at now, we deal with commercial lending, so we had to throw this in with a couple of other single units. But our buy-to-let mortgage at the point of refinance, we got 70% LTV. So based on the new value at 200 grand, we've been able to extract £140,000 back into the business. We've got these properties rented at a combined rental value of £1,850 per month. Our ongoing costs, you can see management 10%, our insurance costs, because of the scale of our portfolio, our insurance costs are quite cheap in the grand scheme of things. And then our interest on our loan at 4.5% is about £525 a month. So ultimately, we've got £10,000 left in this deal, and we're earning just over £1,100 a month in positive monthly cash flow. Now, that basically means that we have bought 4 properties for 10 grand, and we'll have all of that money back within 9 months, and then we'll have 4 assets providing an infinite return of over £1,000 a month. It was an absolute no-brainer to see the outcome of this. However, we did overspend, we did face many challenges we didn't anticipate, and we did technically pay over market value when you look at what the purchase price was, plus the fees, plus sourcing fee and all that kind of thing. This was valued at 65 grand, and it now has a value of 200. 4 fantastic assets to put into any buy-to-let portfolio. And certainly, there's others out there who, if you've been able to get a higher LTV, such as 75%, you would have had all your money back out. Your cash flow every month would have been slightly reduced. But it's been a great deal. So many learnings from myself and Alex and Laurie, but certainly for me in the beginning, trying to piece it all together to make it a viable opportunity was difficult. And then for Alex, Laurie, Richie at the Building Co team, to get this one to the standard that it is, it's been very challenging. Vandalism and various things as the project was going on. So yeah, it's great to have the money back in the bank. Very little left on the table. All of them occupied and earning every month. So yeah, buy-to-let was the chosen strategy for us. We just see all the benefits there. By the end of this year, we'll have all that back. And just enjoying the cash flow that's coming in. So yeah, definitely a worthwhile strategy, and you can see clearly how this one makes you money. Now let's look at an alternative strategy that we could have considered. If your plan was that you didn't want to keep these, there was a number of ways that you could have exited that actually. If we look at the buy to flip strategy as we do every week, the total cost for 149 grand, we know based on the refinance figures that when the surveyor went out, it's revalued at 200k. Sales costs, now this is where it can vary because we're talking about 4 properties here. If you were to sell each property separately, then you're probably looking at, let's say a talking sake of maybe about £800-900 sales fee per property. Legal fees, we know we're about 3 grand on the way in, probably something similar on the way back out. Home report costs 360 times 4, if you're selling them all individually. Alternatively, you could look to sell this as a portfolio of 4, in which case a home report wouldn't be necessary. Your legal fees are probably going to be relatively the same, and your estate agency fees are probably going to be the same because it's a portfolio deal. They're still selling 4 at the end of the day. But yeah, you quite easily could have exited this onto an investor who was happy to pay the £200,000 and keep the 4 properties at a good solid yield. There's certainly appetite for that, but our investment strategy allows for more opportunity and certainly better results. So yeah, maybe if you were going to flip this, you would probably target selling individual units to maximise the value. that you can potentially get from it. So if you did that, taking all these costs into account, selling all the flats individually, you're looking at a potential profit before tax at just over £42,000. So you can see straight away that flipping this whole building, you're essentially selling like brand new properties to the open market. First time buyers would have been all over this. The ground floor flats, maybe you're getting people who are downsizing or something. Certainly exiting these as for resale could have been a viable option. But for us, if we can get all our money back in less than a year and be earning over £1,000 a month in passive rental income, we're going to do that all day long. We're significantly biased on the buy-to-let strategy for all those reasons. But certainly if you wanted to just get your lump sum and tick off the project and move on to the next one, it would certainly be a fantastic return on investment, this deal as well. So yeah, that's the Monty project with all of its challenges and its ugly internal green walls, but it's now walk-in condition flats for great tenants, really appreciative of their new homes as well, and producing, fundamentally it's producing solid income to our portfolio every month. So it's been a fantastic money maker, and these are the type of opportunities that we'll buy all day long, because most investors would probably be put off by the extent of the works that's required. So yeah, that completes another episode of the Moneymaker Monday series. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you've got any specific questions or you want to ask any more detail regarding the renovations and all the type of troubles that we had with it, certainly reach out. You can get me at Conar Tracy on Instagram or Facebook, or alternatively you can drop me an email, which is connor@roodgroup.co.uk. I'm not sure which project I'm going to present to you next week, but regardless of what it is, we'll be making money and I look forward to it. Thank you.